Hello. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
How are you, sir?
I am doing good.
Yes, sir. Sir, first we self-introductions. May I request to the Vice President of SGCCI, Ramesh Bhai Vagasya, sir, please.
Good morning, sir. I am Ramesh Vagasya, Vice President of Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also a tax professional as your fraternity. I am here to advise our clients and business and industry at large, sir. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Ramesh.
Good morning, sir. I
Hello,
am
hello Mukundji.
Advocate CA Mukund Chauhan and practicing in indirect taxes since last 30 years and recently practicing in Gujarat High Court as an advocate. It is my pleasure to meet you many times and hear you at Gujarat High Court also. Unfortunately, we cannot meet person to person at that time. And we are really, today's topic is such a innovative topic, and we are very eager to listen you on this topic, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mukundji.
Good morning, sir. I am Anil Shah, Co-Chairman of Income Tax Committee, Southern Gujarat Chamber of Commerce, and President of Southern Gujarat Income Tax Bar Association. आज का संविधान दिन आपको मुबारक हो. एंड कोइंसिडेंस ऐसा हो गया कि आपका लेक्चर और संविधान डे एक साथ में ही आ गया है. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Anil.
Good morning, sir. I am CA Prakash Bambani, Co-Chairman of GST Committee, sir, Surat.
Hello, Prakash.
Good morning. Myself, CA Tejas Gandhi, Co-Chairman of GST Committee, practicing as a chartered accountant in direct and indirect taxes.
Hello, Mr. Gandhi.
Good morning, sir. I'm CA Jagashet, Direct Tax Committee Chairman, practicing from the last 28 years in direct tax and judicial forums.
Hello.
Morning, sir. I am CA Dharmesh Tamakwada, Co-Chairman of Income Tax Committee, SGCCI.
Hello, Ramesh.
Myself, Dipesh Sakwala, Co-Chairman of Income Tax Committee, ma'am.
Hello, sir.
Thank you, sir. Shall we start, sir? Yes. Good morning and warm welcome all of you to join today's webinar on the subject of constitutional rights and remedies of direct and indirect tax. Today is celebrated as a constitutional day. Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar is one of the architects of modern India and the Indian democracy, the father of the Constitution of India. Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar studies the Constitution of 16 countries, put an enormous amount of efforts to draft the Indian Constitution, which served as a holy book of sovereign democratic Republic of India. His contribution as a chairman of drafting committee of Indian Constitution, one of the key milestones of the foundation of the modern India. It was on 19th November 2015 when the government of India, with the help of a gazette notification, declared on 26 November as a constitutional day. 26 November is celebrated as a Constitution Day to mark the day on which Constitution of India was adopted. The day is also known as Samvidhan Divas, while the adoption of the Constitution took place on 26 November 1949. It came into effect with 26 January 1950. The day is the aim of the promotions constitutional values amongst the citizens of India. Various events like quiz, preamble readings, essay writings are organized all over the country to celebrate these occasions. The day is also occasions the honor of the first law minister of independent India, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, who play a pivotal role in drafting the Constitution of India. One of the inspirational quotes, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, sir, he says, "We wish to maintain democracy not merely in form, but also in fact. What must we do? The first thing in my judgment we must do is to hold fast the constitutional method to achieve our social and economic object." With this quote, may I request to the Vice President of SGCCI, Mr. Ramesh Bhai Vagasya, sir, please to give a welcome address. Sir.
Thank you, Dipesh Bhai. Sir, it's a great honor for us to be with you in this early morning. Generally, Surtis start this early morning with locho, khaman, fafda, jalebi. I think you might have tested in Surat. So likewise, without testing all these things, my dear, all these friends have came here to test your words with like a locho. So it will be a great pleasure for us, sir, on this constitutional day, and a very good and very effective subject of constitutional rights and remedies of direct and indirect tax. On this day and onward on 26th of the January, we became a ruler of ourselves. By this way, we have many things in our constitution to use the rights and to perform our duties towards our beloved countries. Our keynote speaker of the day, Chartered Accountant, Mr. Abhishek Bhai Rastogi, who is our senior advocate at Supreme Court of India, various high courts and tribunals. Our group chairman, Anup Jariwala, group chairman, Shardik Shah, our very active and learned chairman of Income Tax Committee, CA Mr. Pagnesh Jagashet, our Income Tax Committee co-chairman Anil Bhai Shah, our very learned and experienced chairman of GST Committee, Sri Mukund Bhai Chauhan, and our hard-working and managing all this activity GST Committee, Income Tax Committee Chairman Dipesh Shakwala, members of the SGCCI, participants from the tax fraternity and trade and industry. A very good warm morning and a warm welcome to all of you on this wonderful webinar on constitution, rights and remedies of direct and indirect taxes. Friends, taxes are generally an involuntary fees levied by states and union government to carry out their activities. And the roots of every law in India lie in the Constitution. Therefore, understanding the previous provisions of the Constitution is foremost to have a clear understanding of any law prevailing in India. The constitutional provisions regarding taxation in India can be divided into only by the authority of law can taxes be levied, Article 265, levy of duty on tax and its distribution between center and states, which has been stated in Article 268, 269 and 270. A restriction on power of states to levy taxes, which is more importantly important for all of us, Article 286. Direct taxes are collected mostly by Union of India, whereas part of indirect taxes are permitted to be collected by states of United India. It is necessary for state to collect taxes to run the state affairs as well as to provide for special justice and to run the economy efficiently. India's direct tax collection for the financial year 2022-21-22 was highest ever in history, totaling of 14.06 lakhs crores. Total tax collection by Government of India for the financial year 2021-22 was 27 lakhs crore, which is also highest ever in the history of India. We have learned experts on constitutional remedies on taxation with us, and I am sure that in today's session with these experts will add into our understanding our rights, obligations on part of various taxes of the government. Once again, I would like to welcome our honorable speaker, our honorable dignitaries here and online on virtual platform and all the participants. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir, for your kind words. Second one of inspirational quotes by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, sir. However good a constitution may be, if those who are implementing it are not good, it will prove to be bad. However bad a constitution may be, if those implementing it are good, it will prove to be a good. With this quote, may I request to the chairman of SGCCI Income Tax Committee, CA Pragnesh Jagaset, sir, please to say about the webinar.
Thank you very much, Dipesh ji. It's always a great honor to be in front of all dignitaries. Respected Vice Chairman of SGCCI, Ramesh ji. respected Chairman GST Committee, spoken by a very learned speaker in field of GST, co-chairman of various fields. We have co-chairman Anil Bhai Shah, Dipesh Bhai, Dharmesh Bhai Tambakola from the Direct Tax Committee, and we have Prakash Bambani from the Indirect Tax Committee, and Tejas Bhai Gandhi, who is also a very wonderful chartered accountant in our fraternity. At the onset, congratulations and many happy Constitutional Day to all the attendees here. Let me congratulate the makers of this webinar, the topic that has been selected, as we congratulate the makers of this constitution, because this is a very unique topic. We have been a part of many webinars, many seminars, but this topic has instantly caused interest in so many members of SGCCI and over the whole state of Gujarat, that constitutional right and remedies under direct and indirect tax is a very wonderful topic to be taken. It's an offbeat topic with great interest. So I congratulate all the persons who are into making this seminar and selecting this topic as the topic itself. Well, attendees, the direct and indirect taxes in this country are made keeping into mind the tax evaders into mind, which is a fallacy. It should be made keeping into mind the tax compliant into mind. A tax law, it is told by one of the great dignitaries like Nani Palkiwala, the tax suit once started in India will go on for decades together. And if there would have been an Olympic gold medal for this thing, India would have won this medal years and years together. But keeping that aside, we have a great personality like Abhishek ji, who is here to enlighten us on the parent law, the genesis of all the law, the mother of all laws, and the remedies which we have under this law, which may have been forgotten or which may not have been enlightened in the subsidiary laws. So the attendees of this seminar would be highly enlightened by such keynote speakers who have been working in this field from years together. And at the end of the session, I'm sure that after listening to Abhishek ji, we would be no doubt in our mind that yes, the constitution, the makers of this constitution has taken great care that we, the people of India, are supreme and not the makers of this law, which are supreme. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir, Chairman of SGCCI Income Tax Committee. The father of Mahatma Gandhi's famous quote, I would like to share with you. Live as if you were die tomorrow. Learn as if you were live forever. With this quote, may I request to the co-chairman of SGCCI Income Tax Committee, Advocate Anil Bhai Shah, sir. Please introductions of today's learned speaker, CA and Advocate Abhishek Rastogi, sir. Please, sir.
संविधान दिन की खूब खूब शुभकामनाएं. Friends, it gives me great pleasure to introduce before you our worthy learned speaker, Sri Abhishek Rastogi. Abhishek Bhai Rastogi is a prominent lawyer and jurist practicing before Supreme Court, High Court and various tribunals across India. He has a vast and diverse experience, having served as an equity partner with Khaitan and Company. He had an overall experience of 22 years with Ernst & Young, Price Waterhouse and Khaitan. Having a vast practical experience, he regularly makes recommendations to government in policy and fiscal matters. Mr. Rastogi has plethora of landmark writ petitions for diverse sectors to secure effective relief for the client. Recently, he has argued on industry issues such as constitutionality of pre-import condition, ocean freight, continuation of export benefit, arrest proceedings, amnesty scheme, exemption for oxygen equipment, and license fee. On the basis of his initiative, the government brought out various corrective amendments in the law to add more feathers. He has received various prestigious awards, including Economic Times World Tax Award and Asia Legal Development, which is for the top 20 Indian lawyers. He regularly features in prime business news channels such as CNBC, ET Now, and G Business. Over the last couple of years, he has featured more than 300 times in a prominent business daily to share his views. He has authored over a dozen of commentaries on GST, Central Excise, Service Tax, and Foreign Trade Policy. His books were reviewed by late Honorable Finance Minister Sri Arun Jaitley, and recent book, India at 2075 and GST at 5, by Honorable Commerce Minister Sri Piyush Goyal. With these words, I introduce before you our worthy speaker, Sri Abhishek Rastogi. Please give him big hand. Thank you, Deepesh bhai.
Sir, floor is yours.
Myself, C. Anuj Jariwala, Group Chairman, SGCCI.
Sir, floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It is my honor and privilege to share these views because most of you in terms of professions are more senior than me. But yes, last 5 years, I have actively participated in constitutional remedies. And as you're aware that I am both a chartered accountant and a lawyer. And the knowledge for direct taxes and indirect taxes is inherent in the blood because of my degree at the Institute of Chartered Accountants, because we go into detail. So technical knowledge and all comes from that. But the constitutional remedies and the rights which the Indian citizens have are all with this background of legal knowledge. Today, my endeavor will remain to focus on these constitutional remedies and rights. And for a moment, we will forget that whether we are a chartered accountant or a lawyer, and we will also forget for some time whether we are practicing under direct tax and indirect taxes. We will come to some specific provisions of both the laws, but we will forget for some time because today what we are focusing is on the constitutional rights and remedies. And these rights and remedies, interestingly, will be applicable all across statutes, all across different statutes, even apart from taxes. And before I go on to my session, I would once again thank all of you for organizing this virtual webinar and giving me this opportunity to address myself. Possibly during the course of this presentation, I will refer to a few interesting cases also, wherein the constitutional rights and remedies were invoked. And before I go on to these rights and constitutional provisions and remedies, what we have and some specific instances, I think as practitioners, the first and foremost point which we must be convinced ourselves is that whether these constitutional rights must be exercised. Because a lot of times clients will come to you and they will be very reluctant to file a writ petition. Now it is like this, that you have some serious illness and the body requires some treatment. And you say that, without this treatment, I want to become better. It may be difficult. And our constitution has provided these remedies under different circumstances for different situations. So it is equally our duty to tell to our clients that this is a constitutional remedy. Don't be scared. What we are putting before the court is our constitutional right. We are not saying whether this tax authority is good or bad, right or wrong. It is our right under the constitution to explore these remedies. These remedies are provided by which I can go straight to the High Court and to the Supreme Court. And hence there is nothing wrong which I'm doing. I think the first and the foremost point as professionals is to give that sort of comfort to the client, because in 90% of my cases, that apprehension is there at the initial stage. But once the client crosses that barrier, then the burden comes on to us. That how do we prove that there is an actual infringement of fundamental right? Now, as far as our tax laws are concerned, we will focus on only few provisions of the Indian Constitution. any discussion with respect to constitutional rights cannot be done without reference to Article 14 and Article 19. Now, what is Article 14? In terms of the wordings, the Article 14 is nothing but equality before law. But let's understand the essence of Article 14. Article 14 has been invoked for situations which lead to arbitrariness, which lead to inconsistency, which leads to vagueness, and where even a policy decision of the government has been challenged, Article 14 can be invoked. Now, as far as equality in Constitution is concerned, we must not forget that it is mentioned both in the preamble and Article 14. Article 14 has two limbs: equality before law and equal protection of the laws. And there are two important concepts which are very important for us, which will be applicable for both direct taxes and indirect taxes, and I'll give you some examples. The first concept is intelligible differentia. Intelligent reason to create a distinction. And the second most important aspect is rational nexus between classification and the desired result. Now let's take an income tax example. Let's take an example of Section 44 ADA of the Income Tax Act. Section 44 ADA of the Income Tax Act prescribes a limit of 50 lakh rupees. Now, if I were to challenge this provision by way of a writ petition, I would argue like this. How is this limit of 50 lakh rupees prescribed? Is this limit arbitrary? What is the rational nexus between the classification of two income groups, less than 50 lakhs and more than 50 lakhs? Because both of these are professionals. You intend to give benefit to those whose income is less than 50 lakhs. Now, is this arbitrary? Is this a policy decision? Is policy decision subject to judicial review? And why it is 50 lakhs? Why the income group, which is between 50 lakhs to 1 crore, must not get the same set of benefit? And of course, you are denying me the benefit of depreciation and a benefit of claiming expenses. Why this must not be given to the income bracket of more than 50 lakhs? In case of professional, they are the same professionals, chartered accountants, lawyers, or whosoever is qualifying under that 44 ADA. Now, in this situation, Article 14 comes into play. And we can actually force the courts to reach to the conclusion that this limit of 50 lakhs is arbitrary. Now let's take another example from the GST side, custom side, where this pre-import condition was imposed. And when I was arguing before Gujarat High Court, and Gujarat High Court has held this pre-import condition to be ultra-vires the foreign trade policy, the court asked me that, Mr. Rastogi, can you please first explain what is this pre-import condition? And I said, my lord, that's completely my problem as well, because I don't know what this pre-import condition is. And there was a smile across. And I said, the statute today fails to define pre-import condition, and my entire writ petition is on this. So, doctrine of void for vagueness comes into place. Now, if you have seen the famous income tax decision, this Information Technology Act 66A, Shreya Singhal decision, Supreme Court held that if you want to penalize an offense, you must define with clarity what that is. And this was with respect to those menacing messaging, dirty messaging and all. How would you define that? If the term is not defined in the act per se, can it be invoked? So I think today, very importantly, we must examine this concept of intelligible differentia before concluding on the writ remedies, because Article 14 will come into play for most of these situations. The related point with respect to constitutional remedies is with respect to Article 19(1)(g). And a lot of times there could be situation that the provision in itself is so arbitrary or is impacting me that it may kill my business. As per Article 19(1)(g), I have the right to carry on business or profession. But if any provision, the statutory provision, leads to a conclusion that it is becoming impossible for me to conduct my business or is creating a grave hardship, Article 19(1)(g) comes into play. Then there are three more provisions of the Indian Constitution, Article 20, 21 and 22, which we must understand. And these are all applicable for both direct taxes and indirect taxes. So what is Article 20? Article 20 is protection in respect of conviction of offenses. And Clause 1 of Article 20 provides that there must be a violation of a law in force. Lot of times when assessments happens, reassessment happens, or even GST issues are taken into assessment or investigation, what is the violation of law at that point of time? That is important. So for instance, if we see circular trading, and there are some 10,000 arrests with respect to fake invoices and circular trading, and I have taken the matter to the court now by filing a writ of habeas corpus. Initially, we were filing writ of mandamus, etc. But now we are filing a writ of habeas corpus. And the court asked me that, Mr. Rastogi, you are filing a writ of habeas corpus. And I said, yes, my lord. Because I feel that this is a case of illegal detention. They said that you understand that it's a writ of habeas corpus. I said, my lord, I completely understand. And why I say so is that this is the case of illegal detention because we will have to keep in mind Article 20 and Article 21. There has to be a violation of law in force. And there is a board circular now which says that there is no case of tax evasion. And if there is no case of tax evasion as per the board circular, arrest cannot happen. And hence, writ of habeas corpus now comes into play, especially after the board circular, because it completely contravenes the provision of Article 20. Then if we see Clause 3 of Article 20, lot of time, then I think this is very important from even the Evidence Act perspective. The taxpayers who are appearing before the authorities, they are compelled to give statements and so on and so forth. So what Article 20, Clause 3 provides is that compelled testimony is violative of Article 20, Clause 3. So if there is a compelled testimony, that contravenes the provisions of Article 20, and you can retract that statement at any point of time. So it is very important for us to understand Article 20 from two perspectives, that there must be a violation of law in force. If there is no violation of law and some grave action, and it could be even bank account seizure or stock seizure or whatever, need not be arrest. Because Article 20 says protection in respect of conviction of offenses, and 21 also comes into play for protection of life and personal liberty. So violation of law in force. And secondly, what happens when the taxpayer is compelled? Would it violate the provisions of Article 20 clause 3? Now, sometimes the question comes, and I think that's where the relevance of Evidence Act will also come into play. When specimen signature or handwriting, generally it happens in investigation in income tax, that they take that specimen handwriting or signature. And the question which arises is whether there is an infringement of Article 20. Merely taking the specimen handwriting or signature may not, as a necessary corollary, lead to infringement of Article 20, clause 3. But we must keep in mind that Section 27 of the Evidence Act does not offend the provisions of Article 20. And this 27 of the Evidence Act is with respect to information received from accused. Now, one is the information which is received from the accused. If you're receiving some information from the accused, which is as per the provision of 27 of the Evidence Act, it would not offend Article 20. But at the same time, if you're compelling and you're using harsh mechanism and so on and so forth, Article 20 clause 3 will come into play. So I think it is important for us, even from that perspective, to see. And what 23 says, compelled testimony must be read as evidence procured not merely by physical threats or violence, but by psychic torture, atmospheric pressure, environmental coercion, tiring interrogative prolixity, overbearing and intimidatory methods, and the like, not legal penalty for violation. These are the phrases interestingly used. So I think compelling nature will have to be tested. Now let's go to Article 21 and why and how Article 21 is relevant for direct tax and indirect tax perspective. I think Article 21 talks about protection of life and personal liberty. So personal liberty is, of course, gets covered. One very important aspect which we as professionals must note falls under Article 21 is speedy justice. Supreme Court has held that speedy justice, including speedy trial, is a fundamental right under Article 21. So, for instance, if my assessment or reassessment is pending or my investigation is pending, and there is some open hanging sword, and it is not getting concluded for last 8 years, 10 years, 5 years, whatever. It could be both direct tax or indirect tax. Then I have a constitutional remedy even under Article 21. Speedy justice gets covered under protection of life. Speedy trial gets covered under protection of life and personal liberties. So I think knowing this aspect is very important. Last but not the least, let's go to Article 24, which is protection against arrest and detention. And these provisions are slightly different for income tax and GST, and we'll come to that in a while. Income tax, I feel, are more matured provisions because they say that, notice has to be issued and order has to be passed and so on and so forth. Whereas in case of GST, the situation is completely different. And hence, we have also challenged the provisions of arrest from the perspective of decriminalization and constitutionality of it. And I'll come to that. Now, to cover the last but not the least, Article 22, Article 22 is with respect to protection against arrest and detention. And we know as professionals that one of the basic provisions of the Indian Constitution is that the grounds must be informed. I would not go into that detail. And the second relevant aspect is that the person who's detained must be produced before magistrate within 24 hours. And both of these are provided within Article 22 itself. Now, having that background in mind, let us understand that what constitutional remedies we have. As we know that the moment there is an infringement of fundamental right, Part 3 of the Indian Constitution, I can go straight to the Supreme Court under Article 32, or I can invoke writ remedy by invoking 226 by going to one of the high courts, which is my jurisdictional high court, or part of the cause of action must arise within that jurisdiction of that high court. So one important aspect which a lot of time comes into discussion is whether I can go straight to Supreme Court under 32. Both 226 and 32 provides that there must be an infringement of fundamental right. But where there is clearly an infringement of the right, let's say 14 or 19, you could straight go to Supreme Court. But Supreme Court can say that, you could have gone first to your jurisdictional high court. So I think in matters requiring urgent attention, seriousness is high, or there is clear fundamental problem with respect to the infringement of the right, it is an option to go to Supreme Court directly. But I think in most of the situations, because you would also want possibly some provisions which could happen both for direct tax and indirect tax, to read down the provision where the right may not have been contravened. It is suggested that you first go to your jurisdictional high court because your purpose may be served. Lot of times when we draft the praise, it is very important for us not only to challenge the vires of the statutory provision, but possibly at the same time also include in the prayer to read down the provision. Now, if you are having both the praise, it is sometimes better for the courts also, because they may not want to decide on the vires of the provision, but may simply read the provision down. And hence, when reading down could be an option for the court as well, which could be a weighted option, in those situations, the constitutional remedy must be explored under 226. Lot of times, these are famous provisions invoking rights under 226 and 32. But there is one more constitutional remedy, which is inherent powers of High Court under 482 of CRPC. If we see a lot of quashing of these FIRs and other aspects, in this 226 or 32, petition is not filed. So what happens in a situation where natural justice is denied? Is the right remedy to approach High Court under 482 of CRPC comes into discussion. We must remember that 482 is to prevent the abuse of the process of any court, or otherwise to secure the ends of justice. So every time when you are invoking 226, you will have to prove that fundamental right has been infringed, 14, 19, or whatever. But there could be possibly a situation wherein the fundamental right is not infringed, But again, you want to secure the ends of justice. In those situations, I think the third alternative is to invoke inherent powers of High Court under 482 of CRPC. So with this background, I think let's go to some of these interesting practical things which happen under direct tax and indirect tax. Let's talk about summons. If we talk about Section 70 of the CGST Act, summons are issued under Section 70 of CGST Act, and it uses the phrase reason to believe. So no reason to believe, the entire thing works. Reason to believe for arrest, reason to believe for, all of this. If we see 131 of the Income Tax Act, it uses reason to suspect. And if we see 132 of Income Tax Act, search and seizure, it again uses reason to believe. So now let us understand what is this reason to believe. It's very interesting because even the arrest under GST can happen on a reason to believe. So what is this reason to believe? Early morning, I get up from my bed and in my dream, I had some vision. Can that be a reason to believe? Reason to believe cannot be at my own whims and fancies. Reason to believe must be recorded. Reason to believe must be based on evidence. And hence the Evidence Act comes into play, that what is admissible evidence, what is inadmissible evidence, how much reliance could be taken on what evidence, what the accused has admitted, what sort of threat was used, and what sort of evidence you have. And now, why this reason to believe is important is that while the summons could be issued on reason to believe, even anticipatory bail uses the phrase reason to believe. So if we read Section 438 of CRPC, Section 438 of CRPC also uses the phrase reason to believe. And the provisions of arrest under GST also uses, 69 also uses reason to believe. Now, the commissioner on a reason to believe arrests the person under Section 69 of GST. Then there is an equal power based on the same phrase reason to believe for an accused to approach the Session Court or High Court for anticipatory bail under 438 of CRPC. And hence, where reason to believe is not documented appropriately by the adjudicating officer under GST, and reason to suspect under income tax, I think there could be clear infringement of rights under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. So the test is to test this reason to believe or reason to suspect under the Income Tax Act under 131. Now, lot of times we have seen that when these summons are issued, these summons say that these are deemed to be judicial proceedings under 193 of IPC and 228 of IPC. 193 of IPC deals with false statement and 228 of IPC deals with insult or interruption of the officer. Whenever these summons are issued to us under direct tax and indirect taxes both. And they say that these judicial proceedings are deemed to be proceedings as per the provisions of 193 and 228 of IPC. We must understand one very important word used both in 193 and 228, which is intention. So 193 becomes applicable only in case of intentionally giving false statement. Intentionally, this word is very important. So if in a summons hearing or in a search of seizure case under income tax or GST, the statement is given which is not intentional, but based on his knowledge or experience or interpretation, then it is not intentional. 193 of IPC cannot be invoked in that case. Similarly, when 228 of IPC is invoked, insult generally would not happen in case of the search, seizure, etc. Interruption may happen. You may interrupt the proceedings in some way or the other. But that is again intentional. So both for 193 and 228 of IPC, it becomes important for us to understand the intention. The other related aspect is contravention of some of these provisions. Now, when these summons are issued, the summons typically in a lot of cases says that you would contravene the provisions of 174 of IPC and 175 of IPC. So these four provisions are very important when these summons or search and seizure happens. Judicial proceedings, 193 of IPC, 228 of IPC, and contravention of provisions, 174 of IPC and 175 of IPC. And why these are important? What is 174 of IPC? 174 of IPC is with respect to non-attendance. So if summons are issued again and again, and the person is not attending, then we have seen cases of lookout circulars being issued, people being retained at the airport and so on and so forth for non-attendance. This non-attendance get powers from 174 of IPC. There are two very important aspects for me to go to the writ court and explore my constitutional rights and remedies when 174 of IPC is invoked. Because 174 of IPC says that it could be invoked for contravention of non-attendance. Now, what are two important aspects there? When these summons under GST or under income tax are issued, they say that, you would contravene the provisions of 174. But the summons are issued specifically to a person, naming that person. Now, in that situation, you can't invoke 174 of IPC for a reason. Because 174 of IPC uses the word agent or authorized representative, which means if the word agent is used in 174 of IPC, the summons which are being issued to me, I can ideally represent myself through an authorized representative or an agent. Else you do not invoke 174 of IPC. The moment you have invoked 174 of IPC, I have got a right to attend through an agent. And that's why we have challenged a lot of these provisions on these summons being issued to managing director and senior. They need not appear because you are invoking 174. You read 174, it uses the word that I can be represented through an agent. And thereafter, then you are issuing lookout circulars and all. So clear infringement of personal liberties. Second related aspect is, if you see Income Tax Act, for example, under 131, 132 very clearly provides that which officer, commissioner, assistant commissioner, deputy commissioner, whatever, or it uses. If you see GST Act, it uses proper person, which means that when you are invoking 131 or 132 as per the Income Tax Act, there are lesser chances of flaw with respect to who's competent to do that, because the Act itself provides. But when you look that from the provisions of GST, the proper officer has to do that. And that must be a legally competent person to issue those summons or those proceedings. And sometimes DRI issues those. So is DRI a proper officer? So a lot of times the senior intelligence officer issues these summons. Are these proper officers as per the definitions prescribed under GST? We have taken a lot of these issues to court, because these are not proper officers. So for 174 to be invoked, two important aspects: that I can be represented through my authorized representative or an agent, and that officer must be a competent officer. The other aspect for contravention is 175 of IPC. Now, 175 of IPC is with respect to producing documents. Interestingly, 175, and a lot of times these requests come, you give us this document, whole list, long list of documents. It could be both. For now, income tax has a lot of these faceless assessments, but this is generally a practice. Some standard list of 20 documents, they would photocopy, change the name and give. And then they say we will invoke 175 of IPC because you have not produced documents. There can be again two situations here. 175 uses intentionally omits to produce documents. Intentionally omits. Intention must be to omit or produce these documents. Second, we have seen cases wherein the documents may not be in my possession at all. For instance, what may happen is that I am importing certain goods. I am an importer on record. It's a P2P transaction. I pay import duties on the price of the imported goods. But the price between my supplier and his vendor is governed by some master agreement outside of India, to which I am not privy. But my PO order or my bill of entry gives reference to that agreement, because there is a master agreement. Now, in a lot of cases, in a lot of these e-commerce transactions, it has happened to determine both income tax liabilities, TDS and GST liabilities, customs duty liabilities, that for these e-commerce transactions, they ask for those documents. Now, those documents are beyond my control, are not in my possession. Now, in such a case, if you invoke 175 of IPC, I can straight go to the writ court, because these documents are not in my possession. So I think 174 and 175 must be closely looked if these are invoked. We have seen, especially under GST, 5 years of GST, more than 10,000 arrests have happened. And as far as Income Tax Act is concerned, the arrest provisions are invoked after following a chronology. Notice has to be issued, order has to be passed, it has to be in writing with opportunity and so on and so forth. But whereas when you see these powers under GST, on a reason to believe, the commissioner may initiate arrest provisions. So arrest provisions are based on a reason to believe. And a lot of times when we go to the court says that Section 69 clearly provides for the powers to arrest. The moot point which comes is, so it is like this. I have a nuclear weapon, but will I use it always? If there is a power to arrest on a reason to believe, then it is not necessary that that power is invoked every time. And this is a Supreme Court decision on that. Power to arrest does not mean that it has to be exercised. And that is most important. So merely having a power in a statute to arrest does not necessarily mean that this power will be invoked every time you have a reason to believe for some evasion. We must also analyze the offenses. So broadly, if we see, offenses could be categorized in two baskets: bailable and non-bailable, cognizable and non-cognizable. So cognizable, non-cognizable, where a warrant is required only. Now, if we make a combination, IPC provides for 4 types of offenses. So this could be bailable and cognizable, bailable and non-cognizable, non-bailable and cognizable, and non-bailable and non-cognizable. So 4 types: bailable and cognizable, bailable and non-cognizable, non-bailable and cognizable, and non-bailable and non-cognizable. Now, so there are, all of these offenses could be categorized under 4 of these categories. Now, if we see GST provisions deal with 2 offenses: bailable and non-cognizable, and non-bailable and cognizable. So out of 4, we have 2 categories under GST: bailable and non-cognizable, and non-bailable and cognizable. Now, an offense which is non-bailable and cognizable under GST, which is harsher, non-bailable and cognizable, does not follow the procedure of CRPC. Whereas the one which should not be getting harsher punishment, bailable and non-cognizable, is following all provisions of CRPC, which means recording in writing, this, all provisions of CRPC. And hence the question which arises is that whether the statutory provisions with respect to non-bailable and cognizable offense is arbitrary, do not follow the provisions of CRPC, and hence is decriminalization of these offenses a necessity today in terms of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So that is the test on constitutionality which we have taken to the court with respect to these harsh offenses prescribed under the Act. My last point is with respect to these coercive recoveries and arrest. Now, if we see income tax provision, these are, and I call it again and again, more matured provisions, because they have provided for a chronology when it, results in an arrest. So there's a notice issued either after search or without search or whatever. And there is a recording of statement, then recording of an order with appropriate opportunity. And it follows a chronology, and rightly so. The question which arises is, now under the GST Act, whether the same chronology must be prescribed, and if it is not prescribed, is it mandatory to be followed? Now, very famous case of Make My Trip, wherein the senior MD or professionals were arrested even before issuance of the show cause notice. Now, imagine on a reason to believe, Commissioner feels that there is a case of tax evasion, invokes 132 ABCD, one of those 4, and feels that the contravention is more than 5 crores and invokes arrest, takes a person in judicial custody. The moot point which comes is that that reason to believe is just his apprehension. And hence it is important that that reason to believe is concluded by way of an adjudication process. And hence, according to me, any arrest which happens before issuance of the show cause notice and before concluding on that show cause notice is bad in the eyes of law, contravenes provisions of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So with that, I would want to finish my part of the presentation, but happy to address any question if you have. I have prepared just two slides in terms of the pointers, which I can circulate after the presentation. It's just these are just the pointers which I can circulate though.
May I request to the chairman of SGCCI GST committee co-chairman Mukund Chauhan sir to handle the question answer session.
Any question in chat box? What is the question?
During the search procedure.
Yes. Sir, the question is that when the search proceedings is going on, whether the advocate or the legal advisor of that party can enter the premises to help his client or to defend the client from the mishandled by the officers, and to record any kind of a statement or doing the panchinama which is not the genuine and which can give the suffer to his client in future after the completion of this investigation. What are the legal remedies available to an advocate?
This is a very important question and a very practical aspect. I think whosoever has raised this question has faced this practically in these proceedings.
Many cases.
And it is like this. You have a very expensive car and you want to drive that car without an insurance on the road. I don't recommend that, because a small dent on the car also may be, causing huge damage. When we feel that the issue is such of technical nature, or we know that the environment may be hostile, the best way would be to approach the writ court and get the order from the writ court for presence of an advocate, videography, and recording of the entire investigation. I've got dozens of such orders from different courts. This could also include that no coercive action must be taken. So, this writ petition will act as an insurance, practically. Now, if you get that order, nothing like it. And in a lot of cases, court has given this order that they may be at a visible distance, but not audible distance, which is fair. Now, to answer the second part of it, that how that advocate can assist if there is no such order. Practically, if we see even the Evidence Act, if we see all other provisions also which we have discussed, the person who's appearing for summons or for a statement if the question is of technical nature and he's not a technical expert, he can always say that this is what I understand to the best of my understanding and ability. But I am not a technical expert. And for me to give a technical reply on this, I would furnish this by way of a written document or statement after consulting my chartered accountant or an advocate. Is absolutely right, nothing wrong. So both options are there. First, you go to the court and seek for a presence. That will ensure that there will be no hostile action. As far as the recording of the statement is concerned, the authorities may say that, we would not want, but we have seen the provisions of IPC where you could be represented through an agent. Now, if in the summons, he has invoked section 174 of IPC, then I can automatically use that to say that I will be represented through the authorized representative or an agent. Yes. So we must use that in that case.
Sir, the question is under section 132 of the CGST Act, arrest provision. Practically what happens when the search starts at the premises? Nowadays, in the GST, the officers makes an allegation that you have taken the ITC of more than 5 crore. So if you will not accept or if you will not reverse the credit, then I will arrest you. Now, in a scenario when I am a businessman since last 25 years, I am having the factories. What is the need of arresting to me under section 32? Because the arrest requires to help in the jurisdiction proceedings. When I am always available after the completion of the search from 10 to 5 in the office of the investigating officers, whether the arrest is mandatory, because many judgments are there that the arrest is not mandatory when I'm itself is cooperating to the officers and I'm always available to give my statement and help the officers. Please give some lights on this issue, why they are coercively doing the arrest, and it gives the some disturbing the images of the this businessman in a business scenario.
You are absolutely right. And I had mentioned that the existence of the power to arrest does not mean that it has to be invoked.
Yes.
And there's a Supreme Court decision on that, which elaborates on this entire concept. The Supreme Court decision also goes into different situations when this arrest can happen and when this should not happen. Now, as far as 132 is concerned and fake invoices is concerned, in any case, there's a board circular.
Yeah.
Board circular says it is not a case of tax evasion. If it is not a case of tax evasion, you do not exceed the monetary limit of tax evaded of more than 5 crores. That 5 crores is for tax evaded. So you can't invoke arrest at all. And even if you are coerced to pay that amount of whatever reversal of credit or making that payment, generally DRC 03 mein karate hain. They say that you pay it as a voluntary payment.
Yeah.
If that is done, you can move to the court thereafter once the investigation is over. And then say that, there was a coercive action. And if they admit that this is voluntary payment, then I may be refunded that amount. And I must file a refund immediately.
Yes.
So there's some queries as regard to the GST that's been forwarded by our attendees. Proper officer has been amended with retrospective effect. Will this amendment stand the test of legal challenge?
See, proper officer and the customs has been retrospectively redefined. So when it comes to the customs provisions, the retrospective amendment will have to be challenged as well. Let's understand that the retrospective amendment happens or must happen only in rarest of rare circumstances. Retrospective amendment must happen only to remove some flaw and not to reverse any court decision. This retrospective amendment under customs has happened subsequent to Canon India decision. And hence, even retrospective amendment will be subject to judicial inquiry. So retrospective amendment will now have to test the waters of constitutionality, and somebody will have to take it to the court.
So the question is related to GST again, whether proceedings under section 73 and 74 without doing scrutiny under section 61 or audit under section can be done here. 65.
So 73, 74 are for different purposes, willful, etc., and not willful, and so on and so forth. In all of these cases, it is important that the chronology is followed. Now, if you are even issuing notice under 73, 74, unlike customs, GST has had that pre-SCN consulting, which is not there, which shall has become may. So, what is important is that till the stage of that notice, so assuming that we were 2 years, we were in 2020 and that amendment had not been there, or let's say some notice was issued in 2020, then if that notice was issued in 2020, then all of these steps and processes till the issuance of that show cause notice are important to be followed as a process, including pre-SCN consulting, because the word there was shall at that point of time. And hence, to answer your question, all of these steps will have to be carried forward before an SCN is issued, before a notice is issued, under either 73 or 74.
Perfect. The income tax department, the income tax committee is feeling like a second citizen because they're not asking any questions. So I'll be asking one question on behalf of the whole income tax committee. Sections 156 notice, the notice of demand is challenged before the judicial forum and it is pending. Now, bank accounts are normally attached when 20% is not paid in first appeal, 100% is not paid in second appeal, and whatnot. Now, reading this with Article 19(1)(g), my right to do business and profession. And previously, the situation was that some part of my business was in the cash format also. But the present situation wherein 99% of the business is done through digital modes or banking modes. And attaching my bank account, doesn't it infringe my right to do business and profession? And the doors of the judicial forum should be knocked. And this is the right time to knock, because when my stock is not attached, what would I do with my stock when my bank account are attached? And my judicial forum are taking years and years to go. Yeah. Is it not the right time to knock the doors of the judicial forum for this?
Absolutely right. You have raised a very, very important question. But I would have a slightly different approach to answer that. So please don't take me wrong. I'm not saying that you must not approach the court. You must certainly approach the court. But it will also depend on the quantum and usage of that bank account, in the sense that suppose you have a turnover of 100 crores and you have 3 bank accounts, in which one bank account you have 10 crores, the other one you have 20 crores, and the bank account which is attached is, let's say, there could be 2 situations, that the bank, and you have the third bank account in which you have only 2 crores. Now, in a situation wherein the demand is, let's say, 2 crores, and he has attached the bank account in which he has freezed that amount of 2 crores also, then I think in that situation, Article 19(1)(g) will not be applicable, because you have 30 crores and he has done that to the extent of his claim, which he has reason to believe. 19(1)(g) is not applicable, but I'm not saying 482 of CRPC cannot be invoked. That's a separate thing. But 19(1)(g) doesn't come into play, so 226 cannot be invoked. But yes, I have other remedies. I have a remedy under 482 of CRPC to secure the ends of justice, right? Now, taking the different situation wherein he freezes my
Something got frozen there also. I think we are, yeah, our line is okay. Kulin Bhai, because I can see Kulin Bhai moving. So I think our line is perfect.
I am here, you all.
Yes, yes, Kulin Bhai. So now you were a testimony that we are working good.
Okay, okay.
But anyway, we have tax expert here also, Mukund Bhai. Till sir joins, there may be a tax demand in your GST also. So, if sir takes some time, Mukund Bhai, the judicial forum should be knocked when such things takes place. We are at a very active stage of doing it, because given a situation that my bank account does not have any balance, I have a demand of 2 crore of rupees and my bank account stays attached. My stock is unattached. But how can I do business? I still have a demand. I'm not telling I don't have a demand, but the tax officials may have done some mistake or whatever, maybe the judicial forums are taking care of that. I am in the judicial forum, but my article 19(1)(g) is getting infringed. So this is one situation which needs some introspection from all tax professionals. I think Mukund Bhai, you can take this question.
Article 19(1)(g). I think Article 19(1)(g), which gives the constitutional right to the businessman and the liberty to do the business, frequently it is infringed by the income tax officers as well as the indirect tax officers also. There are many provisions in the GST law where the proper officer repeatedly, as per the provision, infringing the rights of doing the business of the business fraternity with the intention to harass the business fraternity. They are misusing their power, which has been given in the law, with the proper prospect to enforce that power. I am taking one of the example to understand the right given under 19(1)(g). If I have not filed any return for the 6 consecutive months, my registrations will be cancelled by the officers. But as soon as he will cancel my registration, I am unable to do my business. Instead of doing cancellation proceedings for this, they should start a preventive action also. He should give us the summons or give us the notice for the making of the payment. And he should understand what is my problem for filing the return. There are many problems for filing the return, because suppose I have sold the goods, I have not recovered the money. But at the time of filing the return, I have to pay the tax. But I am not in a position to pay the tax. That is why I have not filed the return. So there are many other situations that I have already sent my documents to my consultant and he failed to file the return, which is not in my knowledge. All on a sudden, I found that my registration has been cancelled. So the power given in the GST Act to the proper officer, many of the section, I believe, is clearly violating our rights given under Article 19(1)(g). And I think it requires the very corrective actions, because in GST law, the taxpayer are getting harassed by the officers intentionally. So this should be removed and there should be a liberty and the freedom to the business person under Article 19(1)(g). Now the sir has joined the forum.
I'm really sorry. I think there was some connection problem.
Yes.
So going back to that same question, I think very important aspect which was raised is that we will have to see that what remedy we have, whether we must go under 482 of the CRPC if my bank account with minimum balance, let's say of 2 crores was attached and the tax demand was also 2 crores. vis-a-vis the situation wherein for recovering 2 crores, he attaches my bank account for 20 crores and I have huge liabilities to pay, then of course 19(1)(g) gets contravened and I must explore 226. And in case he attaches all my bank account, then I think the situation is very grave. So I think from that perspective, yes, we must explore the right remedy. And of course, I have a remedy to go to the court in this case.
I'm written with the fact, sir, with the same question that my bank account, everything that is there in my bank account, including my minimum balance, is taken away by the department. Still, my bank account stays attached. So at this point, for my furtherance of business, I think Article 19(1)(g), as some light may be thrown on this.
Yes, of course, we can approach the court for infringement of the rights under Article 19.
Perfect. Now we have one more question. It is with the tax department. I'm not sure which tax department Yogesh Rudra is telling, but I think it covers the same question, if I'm not mistaken. It is as regard to the recovery notice to bank without ascertaining the factual position. The time may be too short to approach the High Court for stay of recovery. What is the situation in this case?
Yes, I think this is a practical question. This was a case in this Bite Dance HSBC matter also, wherein the same thing happened. One is that if this amount is frozen, and even if you approach court late, then possibly you can get a direction from the court to reverse that amount. That is one. Secondly, in this case, you can also write to the bank in few cases that bank must do its own due diligence not to do this because for a technical reason. Then it must be very clearly communicated to the tax authorities that this issue is an interpretation issue or is an industry issue. And hence any such action would be subject to all legal actions. And if that communication goes and in spite of that it happens, then today we have Central Vigilance Commission. The North Block also tracks such actions for both direct taxes and indirect taxes, wherein 360-degree appraisal happens even for such officers. We must file a written complaint without naming the officer, but naming the office which has conducted this and has done this.
Very well explained, sir. We have one question. Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Custom has amended Sub-Rule 10 of Rule 96 of Central Goods and Service Tax Rules 2017 by notification dated 53/18 CT, dated 9th October. Whether the said amendment in rule is prospective effect or retrospective?
This is a very interesting question. If you see notification 53 and notification 54, both the notifications have come on the same day. Notification 54 is prospective, whereas on the same day, notification 53 is retrospective. Now, why notification 53 is retrospective, it goes back to the earlier date. The retrospective nature of it has to be tested. Whereas 54 is prospective. So the retrospectivity is not under challenge for notification 54, but what is under challenge for 54 is whether it tests the constitutional waters. Because Rule 96(10) basically debars you from the benefit of rebate as an option if you're claiming one of those 5 benefits, EPCG, advance authorization, deemed exports, and so on and so forth. While these are provided in the Act, the statutory provisions provide for benefit as an option to the Indian exporter, whereas by way of rules, which is the delegated provision, this is being denied. So 54 comes into purview of constitutional challenge. 53 comes under purview of not only constitutional challenge, but also the retrospectivity.
Yeah.
And both, I'm arguing for both of these in more than 10 points.
Anil bhai.
Sir, in Surat, there are many assessment order in which cases assessment order, the AO is passing the order without providing an opportunity to cross-examine the person who has given the statement.
Yeah.
And another question is not of income tax or GST. I have read that there are more than 2 lakhs under trials who are in the prisons, whose period has completed for the offense for which they are under trial. So there are more than 2 lakhs cases. What is the remedy? Whether our association or the Chamber of Commerce can play active role in this regard? Please enlighten us.
So I think for your first question, 482 of CRPC is the right remedy. For the second question which you have raised, the default bail as per the IPC and CRPC provisions read together happens in either 60 days or 90 days. The default bail happens in either 60 days or 90 days, depending on what the offense is. So if it's a GST offense for which the imprisonment is 5 years, the default bail happens in 60 days. If it is something which is more, if it is life imprisonment or murder, etc., sort of an offense, then 90 days default bail has to happen. The only exception is that if prosecution report is filed, then this default bail is not applicable. Now, in those cases, this is what my understanding is. Your question is that if the period prescribed for being in prosecution is, let's say, 3 years, and you've completed these 3 years, a person is not enlarged on bail. This is what I understand. Now, which is completely against the provisions of Indian Constitution, because he cannot be in judicial custody for more than the period prescribed for that offense. In fact, if you see this case with respect to rape, which happened, in which after 7 years, these convicts were basically released, there is a lot of hue and cry that they should be hanged till death and all that. But these tax matters are not heinous crimes. These are financial matters. And if the offense has a prescribed limit for judicial custody, under no circumstances can the person be kept in judicial custody for more than the prescribed period. So bail application must be moved in that case.
Sir, under the GST Act, the protection has been given to the officers that if he has taken any action, I think the word used is reason to believe. And that is why we cannot file any suit. Yani ki taxpayer cannot file any suit against the officer after the completion of all the investigation. And it has come into the picture that the action taken by the officer is not correct as per the provision of the law. Now, I want to know whether we can file civil suit against that officer after the completion of entire incidents and it has been proved that the taxpayer was correct and the action taken by the officer was the malified intention. What are the remedies available to the taxpayer?
We can certainly do that. The reason to believe must not be based on any absurd thoughts. It must be concrete, in writing, concluded with evidence, and Evidence Act comes into play. Third, what most of these offenses are, these are with respect to circular trading of fake invoices, in which the board has now clarified by way of circular dated 6th of July that this is not a case of tax evasion. If it is not a case of tax evasion, he cannot have reason to believe for tax evasion. And if there is no tax evasion, then of course that arrest which he had done was illegal or must now today result in some sort of a penalty even on the officer.
So the question and answers conclude. Now may I request the Southern Gujarat Income Tax Bar Association Vice President Kulin Pathak to say a few words about webinar. Kulin bhai.
Yes, sir. Sir, first of all, I would like to congratulate Mr. Rastogi, sir. You have evaluated the topic and analyzed the topic in a very lucid language, sir. It's a very clear views given by you. I'm sure all viewers, professionals, chartered accountants and advocates are benefited by that. You have also evaluated Article 20, 27, 14, and so more. And it is very, very useful to us. Congratulations, sir, for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now may I request Income Tax Bar Association Secretary Sridhar Shah to say a few words about webinar. Sridhar.
Thank you. Today on Constitution Day, we sailed through Article 14, 20, 21 provisions of that and remedies available under Constitution when you have problems in direct and indirect. Sir has very well told us that please use it. And he also told that our client should be ready to go for it once. Yes, Constitution is the topmost thing which can help us always. Thank you, sir, for telling us that and reminding that. It was an excellent webinar in terms of subject and in terms of delivery by sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank
Now
you.
may I request Valsad District GST Practitioner Association Vapi President Kashyap Gandhi to say a few words about webinar. Kashyap Gandhi.
Thank you all. It was a very useful seminar. The topic selected was a very much needed. We had a very good speaker who explained us the topic in simple language. Our sincere thanks to South Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and to the faculty for sparing valuable time for us and sharing their valuable knowledge. We wish to have more such seminar in future. Thank you to all. Thank you, Speaker.
Now may I request Chartered Accountant Association Surat Committee Member Ketan Gadia to say a few words about webinar.
Thank you, MOC, and best compliments to the Chamber of Gujarat, South Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It is today a Constitution Day, and we are all enjoying. In each and every country, we have must followed by our constitutions or whatever the nation's constitution is, and whatever injustice we are practicing in day-to-day life, we must have to the faith in our constitutions. So I must thanks to the speaker, Abhishek Rastogiji, who has given his best to the today's session, and thanks to the all committee members and.
Thank you, sir. Now, last part, may I request to the chairman of SGCCI GST committee, CA Mukund Chauhan, sir, please propose vote of thanks.
We are very much thankful to the today's speaker, Advocate CA Abhishek Rastogiji, that from his busy schedule, he has taken out the time to enlighten us on the complicated topic of constitutional right and remedies. We are also thankful to the audience and the members of the AGCCI. We are thankful to the Rastogiji that on this topic of constitutional right and remedies, which is a very complicated topic, and he has picked up few of the articles of the constitutions and enlightened us on that provisions of that article, particularly Article 14, which we frequently heard in many of the occasions, that Article 14. What the Article 14 is today very well explained, and Article 19(1)(g), freedom of doing the business. This is very important article, and I think on this article itself, one seminar, webinar we will again arrange, and we will take your time to give us and enlighten us, because this is frequently applicable to the business fraternity, that
Absolutely.
where my 19(1)(g) power has been taken
Absolutely.
away by the officers.
Absolutely.
And
in fact, I have complete thesis running into some 1200 pages on
Yes.
14 and 19 only,
okay,
which I intend to use for one of my court proceedings.
yes.
But yes, this is very interesting aspect which we need to,
Yes.
discuss and elaborate for all of us to, better understand this.
Yes. And thank you very much for giving us the time, and we will again remember you, and we'll again join you in the webinar in time to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I will send this 2-pager document. It may be useful as just the referring points. Thank you.
Obliged, sir. Obliged. Yes.
Thanks.